The manager panics with the billionaire's Arabic. Then the janitor's daughter responds in perfect Arabic and surprises everyone. Before we dive into the story, please leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Michael Roberts wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched the black limousine pull up to the Meridian Corporate Plaza. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 15th floor, he could see the morning sun reflecting off the polished surface of the vehicle. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie for the third time in 5 minutes. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "The biggest deal of my career." The elevator chimed, and Michael's stomach sank. Ahmad al-Rashid, the Saudi billionaire who could single-handedly save his struggling tech company, was about to walk through those doors. The problem: the translator they had hired called in sick at the last minute, and Michael's high school Spanish wouldn't help him with Arabic. The mahogany doors of the conference room opened, and there he was. Ahmad al-Rashid stood tall and dignified, his grey beard perfectly trimmed, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His dark eyes surveyed the room with the confidence of a man who owned half the oil wells in the Middle East. "Peace be upon you," Ahmad said warmly in Arabic, extending his hand to Michael. Michael felt his face lose all color. The Arabic words hung in the air like a foreign song he couldn't understand. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out except a strangled, "Hello, welcome." Ahmad's eyebrows furrowed slightly. He repeated something in Arabic, gesturing toward the presentation materials spread across the conference table. Michael could feel his career slipping away with each passing second of uncomfortable silence. I'm sorry, Mr. Al-Rashid, our translator. There was an emergency," Michael stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. At that moment, the soft squeak of sneakers on the marble floor caught everyone's attention. Emma Rodriguez, age 7, appeared in the doorway, her dark curls bouncing as she held her father's hand. Carlos Rodriguez, the building's night janitor, was clearly trying to pass by quickly without disturbing the important meeting. "Dad, wait," Emma whispered, but her voice echoed in the quiet room. Ahmad turned toward the sound, and his stern expression softened when he saw the little girl. Then something extraordinary happened. "Hello, sir," Emma said clearly in perfect Arabic, her small voice filling the room. "I apologize for the disturbance. Do you need help with translation?" The room fell into complete silence. Ahmad's eyes widened in complete shock. Michael's jaw literally dropped. Carlos looked at his daughter as if she had just performed magic. Ahmad knelt down to Emma's eye level, his face breaking into the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him that morning. "You speak Arabic, little one?" he asked gently in his native language. "Yes, sir. I taught myself. I love languages," Emma responded, in fluent Arabic with the confidence that only children possess. Michael looked desperately between them, understanding nothing, but sensing that something miraculous was happening. How could this janitor's daughter speak fluent Arabic when his million-dollar company couldn't even provide an adequate translator? Ahmad rose slowly, his gaze moving from Emma to Carlos, then to Michael. The billionaire's expression had completely transformed. There was something deeper in his eyes now, surprise, curiosity, and perhaps something that looked like recognition. "This little angel," Ahmad said in accented but clear English, "just offered to help translate our meeting." Michael stood frozen as Ahmad spoke directly to Emma in Arabic, his voice gentle and warm. The 7-year-old girl listened attentively, her small head tilting as she processed each word with remarkable focus, her dark eyes never leaving Ahmad's face, and Michael could see her translating mentally before she even opened her mouth. "He says he's very impressed with your company's proposal," Emma translated, looking at Michael with bright, confident eyes. "But he wants to know more about your commitment to family values and community support. He says that in his country, business is built on trust between families, not just between companies." Michael's mind raced. This wasn't in any of his prepared talking points. His PowerPoint presentation had focused entirely on profit margins and market penetration. "Tell him," Tell him that we believe in supporting working families and that our employees are our greatest asset. We provide health benefits and flexible schedules for parents." Emma turned to Ahmad, speaking fluently in Arabic. Her pronunciation was so natural, it seemed impossible. She was only 7 years old. Carlos stood in the corner, his weathered hands gripping his janitor's cart, watching his daughter with a mixture of pride and complete bewilderment. He had raised this child, given her breakfast every morning, helped with homework, but was discovering she had talents he never knew existed. Ahmad's response was longer this time, his hands gesturing as he spoke with growing animation. He seemed more relaxed now, as if having a translator who truly understood both languages had freed him to express himself completely. Emma listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions in Arabic that made the billionaire laugh with genuine pleasure. "He wants to know about the man in the corner," Emma said, pointing to her father. "He says Dad has kind eyes and the hands of someone who works hard. He asks if Dad works here and wants to know if the company treats Dad fairly." Michael felt sweat forming on his forehead again. "That's Carlos Rodriguez, our building maintenance supervisor," he said quickly, trying to make Carlos's position sound more important than it really was. Ahmad walked over to Carlos with measured steps, extending his hand with the respect he might show to another executive. "You've raised a remarkable daughter," he said in English, his accent making the words sound formal but sincere. Carlos shook the billionaire's hand with calloused fingers that spoke of years of hard work. "Thank you, sir. I don't understand how she knows your language. This is the first time I've heard her speak Arabic." "Neither do I," Ahmad replied, his dark eyes studying Carlos's face with curious intensity, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "But there's something familiar about both of you, something I can't quite place." Emma tugged on Ahmad's expensive jacket with the casual confidence that only children possess. "Sir, would you like to see the presentation now? I can help translate everything, and I promise I won't miss anything important." As Ahmad returned to the conference table, Michael noticed something strange. The billionaire kept looking at Carlos, his expression thoughtful and slightly troubled, as if trying to remember something important, and Carlos, usually confident despite his humble position, seemed unusually nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Dad, why are you shaking?" Emma whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Ahmad's head snapped up at Carlos's reaction. The janitor went completely pale, his face losing all color, as if he had seen a ghost. The next hour passed like a dream for Michael. With Emma's help, the presentation flowed more smoothly than any business meeting he had ever conducted. Ahmad asked detailed questions about their technology, their financial projections, their expansion plans, and their employee retention strategies. But Michael couldn't help but notice that the billionaire's attention kept drifting to Carlos, who remained quiet in the background, occasionally adjusting supplies on his cart, but mostly just watching his daughter with amazement. The conference room felt different now, charged with an energy that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the mystery unfolding before their eyes. Emma moved between languages like an experienced diplomat, never hesitating, never stumbling over complex technical terms that would challenge even professional translators. "Your daughter is absolutely extraordinary," Ahmad told Carlos during a coffee break, his voice full of genuine admiration. "How long has she been studying Arabic? She speaks with an accent that suggests years of formal training." Carlos shifted uncomfortably, his janitor's uniform suddenly seeming out of place in the elegant conference room. "Honestly, sir, I didn't know she could speak it until today. This morning, she left for school speaking only English and Spanish. I'm just as shocked as you are." Ahmad's eyebrows raised in disbelief. "That's impossible. She speaks with the fluency of someone who has studied for years, possibly with native speakers. The grammatical structures she uses are sophisticated, advanced level. I learned on YouTube," Emma interjected proudly, skipping over to join their conversation, "and from books at the library. Miss Patterson, the librarian, helps me find language books. She says I have a gift for picking up sounds and patterns." "YouTube?" Ahmad repeated, his voice incredulous. You learned Arabic from YouTube videos. Yes, I started with Spanish because that's what Dad speaks with me at home. Then I tried French because it sounds like music. Then Arabic because I met someone who needed help and I wanted to understand them better. Arabic is the most beautiful language. It's like singing when people speak it correctly. Michael watched this exchange with growing amazement and a dawning realization that his Harvard MBA hadn't prepared him for this scenario. A 7-year-old child potentially saving his company's future with skills she had taught herself using free internet resources. How many languages do you speak, little one? Ahmad asked, kneeling to Emma's level again, his expensive suit wrinkling as he focused entirely on her response. 5. Spanish, English, French, Arabic, and a little Portuguese. I'm working on Mandarin next because I want to read Chinese stories in their original language. Carlos's face showed a complex mixture of pride and concern. Emma, you never told Dad about all this studying. When do you have time for all these languages? You work so hard, Dad. You're always tired when you come home from your night shifts. I didn't want to bother you with my homework, she said simply, as if dedicating herself to mastering multiple languages was just ordinary homework. Ahmad rose slowly, his expression becoming more thoughtful and intense. Carlos, may I ask where your family is originally from? Mexico, sir. Small town near Guadalajara. Nothing special. And your wife? Carlos's face darkened with old pain. She passed away 3 years ago, cancer. We fought for 2 years, but his voice trailed off. Ahmad's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry. You're raising Emma alone? Yes, sir. We're doing fine. She's a good girl. But Ahmad was studying Carlos's features more intently now, his eyes narrowing as if trying to match Carlos's face with a memory, and Michael could see the gears turning rapidly in the billionaire's mind. That evening, in their small apartment, Carlos sat on his second-hand sofa, watching Emma at the kitchen table, surrounded by library books, printed pages from websites, and a beat-up laptop he had bought used 2 years ago. The sight filled him with a mixture of pride and shame. Pride in his daughter's incredible abilities, and shame that he had been so focused on survival that he had missed seeing her develop these amazing talents. My daughter, show Dad this YouTube learning, he said gently, setting aside the property management company work schedule he was reviewing. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning as she eagerly pulled up her browser. Look, Dad. This is Professor Hassan from Cairo University. He teaches Arabic for free to anyone who wants to learn. On the screen, a gentle professor with graying hair and kind eyes was explaining Arabic grammar using a whiteboard covered in flowing script. Emma followed along effortlessly, pronouncing words perfectly and taking careful notes in a composition notebook filled with her neat handwriting in multiple alphabets. I watch his videos every day after school while you're at work, she explained matter-of-factly. First, I do my regular homework, then I study languages and practice with these language apps. She showed her phone with several language learning apps, each displaying impressive progress streaks. Carlos felt a sharp pang of guilt pierce his chest. He had worked double shifts to pay their bills and keep them in their modest apartment, often leaving Emma alone at night with just a microwave dinner and instructions to call Mrs. Garcia next door if she needed anything. He had no idea she was spending that lonely time becoming a linguistic genius. When did this start, my daughter? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Emma's expression grew serious, older than her years. Remember when Mum was sick and we had to wait a lot at the hospital? There was a little Arabic girl there whose grandfather only spoke Arabic. She was crying because she couldn't understand the doctors and her grandfather couldn't help her. I wanted to talk to her to help her feel less scared, but I couldn't understand anything they were saying, so I started learning. Carlos's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. Even at 4 years old, in the middle of their own family crisis, Emma had wanted to comfort another child by learning her language. The generosity of spirit she had inherited from her mother continued to amaze him. I promised myself that day that I would learn Arabic so I could help people who don't speak English, Emma continued, her voice carrying a determination that seemed impossible in someone so young. Like how you help me with Spanish when I forget words or when I want to talk to Grandma on the phone. But why didn't you tell Dad about all this studying? Emma looked down at her notebook, suddenly seeming very small. You were so sad after Mom died. You still cry sometimes when you think I'm sleeping. I didn't want to give you more things to worry about. I thought if I could learn to help other people, maybe it would make Mom proud of us. Carlos pulled his daughter into his lap, holding her tightly against his chest as tears flowed freely down his cheeks. She had been protecting him even as a child, trying to carry her own burdens while he struggled with grief and financial pressure. My daughter, you never have to hide your gifts from Dad. I'm so proud of you. I can barely breathe. Mom would be proud too. As he tucked her into bed that night, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Ahmad al-Rashid was going to change everything. But he had no idea how much his world was about to transform. The next morning, Ahmad returned to the office building earlier than expected. Michael found him in the lobby at 7 a.m., chatting animatedly with Carlos as the janitor finished the last of his night shift duties. The billionaire was leaning against Carlos's cart as if they were old friends, completely ignoring the comfortable leather chair in the waiting area. Mr. Al-Rashid, I wasn't expecting you until 9. Michael said, hurrying over while trying to button his hastily thrown-on jacket. I wanted to speak with Carlos and Emma again before we continue our business discussions, Ahmad replied, his tone suggesting this conversation was as important as any million-dollar deal. I hope you don't mind the early hour. Emma bounced over from where she'd been sitting on a lobby bench, her school backpack slung over one shoulder and her face bright with the energy that only children possess in the morning. Good morning, Mr. Ahmad. Did you sleep well? Dad says you're staying at the fancy hotel downtown. Very well, thank you. And please call me Uncle Ahmad. In my culture, that's how we address family friends. Carlos visibly tensed at this request, his hand tightening on the mop handle, and Michael noticed the reaction with growing curiosity. Emma, I have some questions for you, Ahmad continued, kneeling to her eye level. Yesterday when you were translating, you used some very specific Arabic phrases, formal business terms and cultural expressions. Where exactly did you learn those? From the videos mainly. Professor Hassan teaches business Arabic on Thursdays, but also from Mrs. Khalil at the corner market. She taught me how to say please and thank you correctly, and how to show respect to elders. Ahmad's eyes widened with interest. Mrs. Khalil, she's from Lebanon. She came here 20 years ago with her husband. She says I have a good ear for Arabic pronunciation, that I sound almost like a native speaker. Sometimes when Dad sends me to buy groceries, she speaks to me only in Arabic to help me practice. Ahmad turned to Carlos with an expression of growing intrigue. Your daughter has been practicing with native speakers. You allowed this? I didn't know, Carlos admitted, feeling increasingly like he'd been living with a stranger. Emma, why didn't you tell me about Mrs. Khalil teaching you? You always say not to bother people with our problems, Dad, but Mrs. Khalil likes teaching me. She says I remind her of her granddaughter in Beirut, and that teaching me Arabic helps her feel less homesick. Ahmad's expression became more intense, almost urgent. Carlos, I need to ask something very personal, and I hope you'll forgive my curiosity. What was your mother's maiden name? The question hit like lightning from a clear sky. Carlos's face went white as paper, and he stepped back as if he'd been physically struck by the words. Why? Why are you asking that, sir? His voice came out strangled, barely audible. Please, just answer the question, it's important. Now Carlos looked around the lobby as if searching for an escape route, then at Emma, who was watching the adults with growing concern and confusion. His voice came out as barely a whisper. Salamanca. Maria Salamanca. Ahmad's eyes widened dramatically, and for a moment he looked as if he had seen a ghost rise from the dead before his very eyes. Ahmad stared at Carlos for what seemed like an eternity, his face cycling through disbelief, recognition, shock, and something that looked like deep sadness mixed with joy. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his jacket pocket. "Carlos, what was your grandfather's name?" His voice was barely controlled, as if he was struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Sir, I don't understand why you're asking these questions. Please, this is more important than you can imagine." Carlos looked nervously at Emma, who was watching the adults with growing concern, her bright morning energy fading into worry. "His name was Antonio Salamanca. But sir, he died when I was very young, maybe 6 years old." Ahmad sank heavily into one of the lobby chairs, as if his legs had given out completely. "Antonio Salamanca, from Guadalajara." "Yes, but how could you know that? My grandfather never traveled. He was just a mechanic who worked on cars in a small shop." "Because," Ahmad said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "Antonio Salamanca was my business partner and closest friend 35 years ago." The lobby fell into complete silence, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Michael felt like he was watching a movie where the plot had just taken an impossible twist that defied all logic. "That's impossible," Carlos whispered, shaking his head. "You must be thinking of someone else." Ahmad reached for his wallet with trembling fingers and pulled out a faded, creased photograph that looked like it had been carried for decades. It showed a much younger version of himself, perhaps 30 years old, standing next to a Mexican man in work clothes. Behind them rose the skeletal structure of an oil derrick against a desert landscape. "Your grandfather and I discovered 3 oil fields together in Saudi Arabia in 1989, Ahmad said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "He saved my life twice. Once from a gas leak that could have killed us both, and once from bandits in the desert who wanted to steal our equipment." Carlos took the photograph with trembling hands, staring at the face he recognized from childhood memories. That's definitely Grandpa, but he was just a mechanic. He worked on cars in Guadalajara. He never mentioned oil fields or Saudi Arabia." "He was much more than a mechanic," Ahmad said softly. "He was an engineer who understood machinery better than anyone I've ever met. He was my closest friend, my brother in everything but blood. We were going to be partners for life, build an empire together. But one day, he simply disappeared, left Saudi Arabia without a word, without taking any of the money he had earned. I never knew why. I spent years trying to find him." Emma moved closer to her father, instinctively sensing his distress, even though she couldn't fully understand what was happening. "Dad, why are you crying?" Carlos wiped his eyes, still staring at the photograph that was rewriting everything he thought he knew about his family's history. "Grandpa used to tell me stories about the desert, about working with oil and meeting people from faraway places. I always thought they were just bedtime stories he made up." "They were real," Ahmad said firmly. "All of them. Every word. And Carlos, I think I know exactly why your grandfather left Saudi Arabia so suddenly." He paused, looking directly into Carlos's eyes, with an intensity that made the janitor feel as if his soul was being read. "Your grandmother was pregnant, wasn't she, with your father?" Carlos nodded slowly, his mind spinning. "Antonio chose family over fortune. He came home to be with his pregnant wife instead of staying to claim his share of the oil fields we discovered together." Ahmad's voice was thick with emotion and admiration. "Those fields are worth over $2 billion today." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded, changing everything. "Which means," Ahmad continued, his voice growing stronger and more certain, "that your family is entitled to half of everything I own." Carlos looked at Ahmad as if the man had just claimed the moon was made of cheese and offered to sell him a piece. "Sir, with all respect, I think there's been some terrible mistake. My family, we're nobody special. We've always been poor. My grandfather fixed cars for farmers who could barely pay him." Ahmad rose from the lobby chair with renewed energy, his eyes burning with the passion of someone who had finally found a lost piece of his soul. "Carlos, Your grandfather was one of the most brilliant men I've ever met in my entire life. He could diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it run for 30 seconds. That's exactly the skill we desperately needed in the oil fields, understanding complicated machinery that other engineers couldn't figure out even with weeks of study. Michael watched this exchange with growing amazement and a dawning realization that his million-dollar business deal had somehow become completely secondary to a 35-year-old family reunion. The corporate world he understood so well seemed insignificant compared to this emotional earthquake unfolding before his eyes. "Uncle Ahmad," Emma interjected with the fearless curiosity of childhood, tugging insistently on his expensive sleeve. "Why is Dad so upset? Did we do something wrong? Are you angry with us?" Ahmad knelt to her level again, his voice becoming gentle and reassuring. "No, little one. Your dad is just learning that his grandfather was a very important man who helped me build my entire business long ago before you were born." Dad's grandfather was important. Emma's eyes widened with admiration and excitement. "Dad, you never told me great-grandpa was famous. Why didn't you tell me he was special?" Carlos ran his hands through his hair, looking completely overwhelmed by information that was rewriting everything he thought he knew about his family's history. "Because I didn't know my daughter. I was just a boy when he died. To me, he just fixed cars and told stories I thought were made up." Ahmad pulled out his smartphone and scrolled through several screens of saved documents before showing Carlos a yellowed newspaper article from 1990. "Look at this. I've kept every article about your grandfather for 35 years, hoping someday to find him or his family." The headline read, "Mexican engineer Antonio Salamanca disappears from Saudi oil operation." Carlos read with growing shock as the article described his grandfather as a brilliant mechanical engineer whose innovative techniques had revolutionized oil extraction procedures in the hostile desert environment. "This has to be a different Antonio Salamanca," Carlos insisted, though his voice lacked conviction and his hands shook as he held the phone. "There must be dozens of men with that name." "Carlos," Ahmad said gently, his voice carrying the weight of decades of friendship. "What did your grandfather always say when something was broken and everyone said it couldn't be fixed?" Without thinking, Carlos responded automatically, the words coming from deep childhood memory. "Nothing stays broken forever if you understand how it was supposed to work in the first place." Ahmad's face broke into a wide smile full of joy and remembrance. "He said that exact phrase to me 100 times in 2 years, usually right before fixing something that everyone else, including me, said was impossible to repair." The lobby fell completely silent as the weight of this connection settled over them like a blanket. Emma looked between the two men with growing excitement, sensing that something momentous was happening, but not fully understanding the magnitude of what she was witnessing. "Even if all this is true," Carlos said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "it doesn't change anything about our lives. I'm still just a night shift janitor. Emma and I are still just surviving day to day, paycheck to paycheck." Ahmad's expression grew serious and determined, his business instincts combining with deep personal conviction. "Carlos, it changes absolutely everything. Your grandfather earned his share of those oil fields with his own hands, his own brilliant mind, his own innovations. He chose love over money, family over fortune, but that money was always rightfully his. And now it's rightfully yours and Emma's." Michael finally found his voice after what seemed like hours of stunned silence. "Mr. Al-Rashid, what does this mean for our business deal? Are we still moving forward with the investment?" Ahmad looked at him with a slight smile that suggested their business relationship was about to become much more complex and interesting. "Michael, I think our business relationship is about to become much more fascinating than either of us imagined. But first, I need to correct a wrong that's been haunting me for 35 years. Carlos shook his head firmly, his pride and work ethic battling with the impossible opportunity being offered. "Sir, I appreciate everything you're saying, but I can't accept money I don't feel is mine. I work hard for what I have. I've always worked for everything. Your grandfather worked for it too, Ahmad replied with quiet intensity, and he earned every penny with blood, sweat, and genius. That afternoon, Ahmad insisted on personally driving Carlos and Emma to their apartment in his sleek black Mercedes. The luxury vehicle seemed completely out of place in their modest neighborhood, drawing curious stares and whispered conversations from neighbors sitting on stoops and children playing hopscotch on the narrow street. "This is where we live," Emma announced proudly, pointing to their second-floor apartment in an aging red brick building that had seen better decades. "It's small, but Dad keeps it very clean, and Mrs. Garcia next door makes the best empanadas in the whole neighborhood." Ahmad followed them up the narrow staircase, his expensive Italian leather shoes echoing on the worn wooden steps that creaked with each footfall. Inside their small apartment, he looked around with genuine interest rather than the judgment Carlos had feared, noting the carefully maintained second-hand furniture, the organized pile of Emma's school books and homework, and the small shrine with a photograph of Emma's mother surrounded by flickering candles and fresh flowers. "Your wife was absolutely beautiful," Ahmad said softly, studying the photograph with respectful attention. "She was the most beautiful woman in the world," Carlos replied, his voice thick with emotion that still seemed fresh after 3 years. "She would have loved meeting you. She always believed in Emma's potential more than I did. She said Emma was going to do something extraordinary with her life." Ahmad noticed something else on the small bookshelf that made him stop breathing, an old wooden box with intricate Arabic-style carvings. "Carlos, may I ask what's in that box?" Carlos hesitated for a moment, then carefully picked up the precious box with reverent hands. "These are the only things I have from my grandfather. My father gave them to me just before he died, said they were too important to throw away." Inside the box were several faded black and white photographs, some handwritten letters in Spanish on thin paper, and a small metal object that made Ahmad gasp audibly and grab the edge of the table for support. "Carlos, do you have any idea what this is?" Ahmad asked, holding the metal piece with trembling fingers. "Some kind of tool, I think. Grandpa always carried it in his pocket. My dad said he never went anywhere without it." "This is a custom drill bit that your grandfather designed specifically for our oil operation in the Saudi desert. I have the exact same one in my office in Riyadh. He made only 2 of them in the entire world, one for him, one for me." Ahmad examined the handwritten letters with growing excitement, his eyes scanning the faded Spanish text. "Carlos, can you please read these aloud?" Carlos translated slowly, his voice choking with emotion. "My dear son, the work in the desert is dangerous, but more important than anything I've ever done. I'm learning so much about oil extraction and advanced machinery. My partner Ahmad is a good and honorable man, but I miss you and your mother terribly every day. If something happens to me here, know that I've left something valuable for the family's future." "He wrote about me," Ahmad whispered, his eyes filling with tears as decades of wondering about his lost friend suddenly made sense. After all these years, he was thinking of me. Emma had been listening silently to everything with the intense focus she brought to her language studies. "Dad, does this mean we're rich now like Uncle Ahmad?" Carlos pulled his daughter close to his chest, feeling the weight of decisions that would shape their entire future. "My daughter, money doesn't make people rich inside their hearts. Love makes people rich where it really matters. But Uncle Ahmad says great-grandpa earned money by working hard. Wouldn't he want us to have it so I can go to good schools?" Ahmad looked at Carlos with deep respect and growing understanding of the man's character. "Your daughter is wise beyond her years, Carlos. Antonio absolutely would want his family to be safe, to have opportunities he never had, especially Emma, with all her incredible gifts that could change the world." Carlos wrestled with conflicting emotions that tore at his heart. "My whole life, I've worked for everything we have. I taught Emma that you earn what you get through honest work. This feels like charity, like something I don't deserve." "It's not charity," Ahmad said with absolute conviction. "It's justice that's 35 years overdue. Your grandfather earned that money with his own hands, his own brilliant mind, his own innovations that made millions of dollars possible. He just chose something more valuable than money when he chose to come home to family. That night, as Ahmad prepared to leave their modest apartment, he handed Carlos an elegant business card with gold lettering. "I'll have my lawyers research everything thoroughly. But Carlos, I want you to know something important. Whether you accept the inheritance or not, your grandfather was the best friend I've ever had in my life. Meeting you and Emma feels like recovering a piece of my soul I thought was lost forever." And as they watched the Mercedes disappear down the narrow street lined with old buildings, Emma looked at her father with those wise, dark eyes that always seemed to see more than a 7-year-old should. "Dad, are you scared of all this?" Carlos considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest with his daughter. "Yes, my daughter. I'm afraid of everything changing too fast." But maybe," Emma said thoughtfully, swinging her small hand in his, "some changes are good changes, like when I learned Arabic and could help people understand each other better." Carlos hugged his wise daughter close, wondering how a 7-year-old could see life so clearly when his own vision seemed clouded with uncertainty and fear. 3 days later, Ahmad returned with a small army of lawyers and a stack of legal documents that covered Carlos's entire small kitchen table, transforming the modest apartment into an impromptu law office that intimidated Carlos but fascinated Emma. "The documentation is absolutely clear and legally ironclad," said Margaret Chen, Ahmad's lead attorney, a sharp woman in an expensive suit who spoke with precise authority. Antonio Salamanca was a full and equal partner in the Al Rashid oil operation. According to Saudi partnership law and international business agreements, his shares should have automatically transferred to his legal heirs upon his death. Carlos sat across from them, still wearing his grey janitor's uniform from his day shift at the office building, feeling completely out of place among all these legal professionals. But he never made any claim. He never told anyone in the family about this partnership. How can we prove he actually wanted us to have this money? That doesn't negate his legal rights or yours as his direct descendant, Margaret explained patiently, spreading out financial documents that showed decades of profit calculations. The value of his share with accumulated profits and compound interest over 35 years comes to approximately $1.2 billion. The number hit Carlos like a physical blow that knocked the air from his lungs. "That's completely impossible. People like me don't have that kind of money. That's more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes." "Dad," Emma said from her spot on the worn carpet where she was doing homework, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish as she worked on different assignments. "You keep saying people like us, but maybe we're different people than we thought we were." Ahmad smiled at her wisdom, with the pride of a favorite uncle. "Emma is absolutely right. Money doesn't change who you are inside your heart. It just gives you more choices about how to help people and make the world better." But Carlos was shaking his head, overwhelmed by the magnitude of decisions he never imagined having to make. "I need time to think about all this. This is all happening too fast for me to process." "Of course," Ahmad said gently, understanding the weight Carlos was carrying. "But Carlos, there's something else you should know about the partnership agreement. It included a special clause about future generations. If Antonio had children or grandchildren who showed exceptional abilities, they would be eligible for additional educational support and opportunities." He gestured toward Emma, who was switching effortlessly between multiple languages while completing different assignments. "I think your daughter more than qualifies for those provisions." "What kind of educational support?" Carlos asked with a parent's protective suspicion. "The best schools in the world, private tutors for her language studies with native speakers, university anywhere she wants to go, including Oxford, Harvard, or the Sorbonne. All already paid for through the Partnership Trust Fund, just waiting for Antonio's family to claim it." Emma looked up from her homework with excitement shining in her dark eyes. "Does that mean I could study with real teachers instead of just YouTube videos?" "The best teachers in the entire world," Ahmad confirmed with a warm smile. Carlos felt completely overwhelmed by the implications of these choices. I can't make decisions this big that will affect Emma's entire life. What if I choose wrong? What if this money ruins Emma's character and makes her forget where she came from? Margaret leaned forward with the wisdom of 20 years handling wealth transfers. Mr. Martinez, may I speak honestly? I've been dealing with inheritance cases for 2 decades. The people who worry about money ruining their character are usually exactly the ones who handle it best. That night, after everyone had gone and the legal documents were safely put away, Carlos called his sister Maria in California. "You're not going to believe what happened to us today," he began, and spent over an hour explaining the impossible situation that had turned their lives upside down. "Carlos," Maria said when he finished the incredible story, "do you remember what Dad always told us about Grandpa when we were kids?" "What do you mean exactly?" "He always said that Grandpa had opportunities to get rich in America, but chose family instead every time. Maybe this is Grandpa's way of saying from heaven that now you can have both." As Carlos tucked Emma into her small bed that night, she asked the question that had been weighing on his mind all day. "Dad, if we accept Uncle Ahmad's money, does that mean you won't be my dad anymore?" Carlos's heart broke a little at the vulnerability in her voice. "My daughter, I will always be your dad, no matter what happens. Nothing in the whole world could change that." "Then why are you so scared of all this?" Carlos considered her question with the honesty she deserved. "Because I'm afraid that if we have too much money, people will treat us differently. I'm afraid you'll forget where you came from and stop caring about people who don't have as much." Emma thought about this seriously, her young mind working through complex ideas. "But Dad, I learned Arabic so I could help other people understand each other. If we have money, couldn't we help even more people in bigger ways?" Once again, his 7-year-old daughter had cut straight through his fears to the heart of what really mattered. A week later, just as Carlos was beginning to cautiously accept the reality of his impossible inheritance, everything changed again in the most devastating way possible. Ahmad burst into the building lobby where Carlos was methodically mopping floors during his night shift, his face dark with concern and barely controlled anger. "Carlos, we have a serious problem, a big one that threatens everything." Carlos immediately dropped his mop, sensing trouble in Ahmad's tone and body language. "What kind of problem are we talking about?" "My nephew Khalid has officially challenged the inheritance in court. He's claiming that the partnership with your grandfather was never legally valid and that all the money should remain permanently in the Al-Rashid family line." Carlos felt a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment wash over him. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe all this was too good to be true from the beginning. "Absolutely not," Ahmad said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to fighting for what's right. "This is about pure greed and family politics, not justice or legal truth. Khalid is hoping I'll die so he can inherit everything without sharing. The idea that you have a legitimate claim threatens all his future plans." Emma appeared behind Carlos, having just gotten off the school bus and still wearing her pink backpack. "Uncle Ahmad, why do you look so angry? Did someone hurt your feelings?" Ahmad knelt to her level, trying to control his emotions for her sake. "Someone from my family is trying to say that your great-grandfather didn't really earn the money I want to give to you and your dad." "But that's not fair," Emma said with the clear moral vision that only children possess, her voice rising with indignation. "If great-grandpa worked hard for the money, then he earned it fairly." "I agree completely, little one, but now we have to prove it in court with lawyers and judges." Carlos felt his stomach sink with dread. "Court? I can't afford lawyers to fight against billionaires with unlimited resources." "You won't need to worry about that," Ahmad said decisively. "I'll handle all the legal costs, the best lawyers money can buy. But Carlos, there's something else you need to know. Khalid has hired private investigators to dig deep into your background. They're trying to find anything they can use to discredit your claim. What kind of things are they looking for?" Ahmad hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he had to say. "Immigration status, employment history, Anything that might make you look unworthy of the inheritance in front of a judge. Carlos's face hardened with righteous indignation. I'm a legal resident. I've never broken the law in my life. I work hard and pay my taxes on time every year. I know that, and I believe in your character completely, but they're also questioning Emma's abilities. They're claiming that a 7-year-old child couldn't speak Arabic as fluently as she does without some kind of elaborate fraud or coaching. This made Carlos angry in a way that threats to himself never could. They think my daughter is lying about her language skills. They want to test her formally, complete examination by university linguistics professors to prove her abilities are real. Emma tugged on Ahmad's sleeve with complete confidence. Uncle Ahmad, I'm not afraid to take any test they want to give me. I know I can really speak Arabic, and I can prove it. Ahmad looked at Carlos with respect for the difficult choice ahead. The decision is entirely yours, my friend. We can fight this legal battle, but it won't be easy or quick. Khalid has unlimited resources and no moral limits on what he'll do to win. Carlos looked at his daughter, who stared back at him with complete confidence and trust in his decision-making. She believed in herself and believed in the truth. What would happen if we don't fight this challenge? Carlos asked. Khalid gets everything, and the world never knows that Antonio Salamanca was one of the most brilliant engineers in the oil industry, or that his family deserves recognition for his contributions. Carlos thought about his grandfather, who had abandoned fortune to stay with family 35 years ago. Then he thought about his daughter, whose extraordinary gifts deserved every opportunity to flourish. We fight, he said quietly but with determination, for Grandpa's memory, for Emma's future, for the truth. Ahmad smiled with fierce pride. Then we fight together as partners. Indeed. But none of them realized that Khalid's investigation had already uncovered something potentially devastating that would change everything once more. The linguistics examination took place at Columbia University in a stark white conference room that intimidated Carlos, but seemed to energize Emma with the excitement of an academic challenge. 3 distinguished professors sat across from his 7-year-old daughter, armed with recording equipment, evaluation forms, and openly suspicious expressions. This is highly irregular and unprecedented, muttered Dr. Sarah Williams, the lead examiner, as she adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and shuffled her test materials. Testing a child this young for university-level linguistic proficiency is completely outside normal protocols. Ahmad sat beside Carlos in the observation gallery, both men tense with anticipation and protective concern for Emma. Remember, Ahmad whispered, they're not just testing her Arabic skills. They're looking for any possible reason to discredit her talents and our entire case. Dr. Hassan Al-Mahmoud, an Arabic native speaker and professor from Cairo University, began the examination with basic questions. Young lady, can you please tell me your name in Arabic and explain why you're here today? Emma smiled confidently and responded in fluent, elegant Arabic, introducing herself politely and explaining that she felt honored to meet such distinguished professors and hoped to demonstrate her language abilities. The 3 examiners immediately exchanged surprised glances. Dr. Al-Mahmoud continued with increasingly complex questions, advanced grammatical structures, sophisticated vocabulary, cultural contexts, regional dialects, and literary references. Emma answered each one not just correctly, but with the nuanced sophistication of someone who truly understood the deep cultural meanings of the language. After 2 intensive hours of rigorous testing that would challenge graduate students, the professors huddled in whispered conference, occasionally glancing at Emma with amazement. Dr. Williams finally addressed the room with professional authority. In 30 years of teaching linguistics, I have never encountered a child with this level of natural linguistic ability. Emma Martinez demonstrates not just fluency, but cultural understanding and grammatical sophistication that normally requires years of intensive immersion study. Dr. Al-Mahmoud added with genuine admiration. Her accent is remarkably authentic for a non-native speaker. She has somehow absorbed pronunciation patterns and cultural nuances that are extremely difficult to master even for adult students. Carlos felt a wave of pride so intense it brought tears to his eyes. Ahmad squeezed his shoulder in shared triumph and support, but their moment of celebration was suddenly interrupted when Margaret Chen burst into the room with urgent and devastating news. "Ahmad, we have a major problem. Khalid's investigators found something serious." Ahmad's face immediately darkened with concern. "What kind of something?" "They discovered that Antonio didn't leave Saudi Arabia just because his wife was pregnant. There was another reason, and it's not good." The room fell completely silent. Carlos felt ice forming in his stomach as dread washed over him. "What reason?" Ahmad asked calmly, dreading the answer. Margaret hesitated, clearly uncomfortable delivering this bombshell news in front of Carlos and Emma. "They're claiming that Antonio was suspected of stealing valuable equipment from the oil field, that he fled the country to avoid prosecution for theft." Carlos felt as if he'd been physically punched in the chest. "That's absolutely impossible. My grandfather was the most honest man who ever lived." "I believe you completely," Ahmad said firmly, his loyalty unwavering. "But Khalid is using this accusation to argue that Antonio forfeited any rights to the partnership profits when he allegedly committed theft." Dr. Williams and her colleagues looked extremely uncomfortable witnessing this intense family drama unfold in their academic examination room. "Is there any actual evidence of this supposed theft?" Carlos asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Margaret nodded grimly, producing official documents. "Saudi police reports from 1990. They claim Antonio took specialized drilling equipment worth $50,000. Ahmad rose abruptly, his face pale with shock and confusion. "I need to make some urgent calls immediately. This doesn't make any sense at all." As they left the university, Emma walked between her father and Ahmad, sensing the heavy tension but not understanding its devastating source. "Dad, did I do well on the test?" she asked innocently. "You were perfect, my daughter. I'm incredibly proud of you." "Then why do you and Uncle Ahmad look so sad?" Carlos struggled to explain without destroying her faith in their family. "Some people are saying that your great-grandfather did something wrong a long time ago." "Did he really do something wrong?" Emma asked with the straightforwardness typical of a 7-year-old. Carlos looked at his daughter's trusting face. "I don't believe he did, my daughter. But sometimes believing isn't enough in court." Ahmad stopped walking and turned to face them both with fierce determination. "Carlos, I knew your grandfather's character my entire adult life. If he took that equipment, he had a good reason, and I intend to find out exactly what it was." "Makasan." But as they climbed into Ahmad's Mercedes, none of them noticed the black sedan that had been following them all day, or the telephoto lens capturing every moment of their conversation from across the street. Khalid al-Rashid was building his case methodically, and he was prepared to completely destroy Antonio Salamanca's memory and his family's future to protect his own massive inheritance. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and curious onlookers as the inheritance case reached its dramatic conclusion. Carlos sat beside Ahmad at the plaintiff's table, his hands folded tightly in his lap, while Khalid al-Rashid smiled confidently from across the aisle, surrounded by his expensive legal team. Judge Patricia Morrison called for order as she reviewed the final evidence. "This court has heard testimony about Antonio Salamanca's partnership with Ahmad al-Rashid, as well as serious allegations of theft. Before I render my decision, are there any final statements?" Khalid's lead attorney rose triumphantly. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Antonio Salamanca fled Saudi Arabia with stolen equipment worth $50,000. A thief cannot claim partnership rights." Ahmad's lawyer was about to respond when the courtroom doors opened. An elderly man with a cane walked slowly down the aisle, supported by a younger woman who was clearly his daughter. "Your Honor," the old man called out in accented English, "I have information about Antonio Salamanca that this court needs to hear." Judge Morrison looked surprised. "And you are?" "My name is Mahmoud Al-Kindi. I was the site supervisor in Saudi Arabia in 1990. I know exactly why Antonio took that equipment. The courtroom exploded in whispers. Khalid's face went pale as his confident smile vanished. "Proceed, Mr. Al-Kindi," said the judge. The old man's voice echoed clearly through the silent courtroom. On March 15, 1990, our oil rig suffered catastrophic pressure buildup. The safety systems failed, and we had a massive gas leak that threatened to kill everyone on site. The regular evacuation equipment was broken. Ahmad leaned forward, remembering that terrifying day with crystal clarity. "Antonio Salamanca took that drilling equipment without permission," Mahmoud continued, "because it was the only thing that could drill an emergency relief valve to prevent an explosion that would have killed 43 workers. Carlos felt his heart pounding as the truth finally emerged after 35 years. He worked for 18 straight hours in deadly conditions, using that equipment to save every life on that platform. When the emergency was over, Antonio was exhausted and covered in oil. He said he was going home to his pregnant wife and would never return to the desert. Mahmoud's daughter helped him turn toward Carlos. Antonio Salamanca didn't steal anything. He borrowed equipment to perform the most heroic act I witnessed in 40 years in the oil industry. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Ahmad had tears streaming down his face as memories flooded back. "I tried to stop him from leaving," Ahmad said, standing up, his voice breaking with emotion. "I begged him to stay, to claim his share of the profits, but Antonio said his family was worth more than all the oil in Saudi Arabia." Judge Morrison looked at Khalid, whose expensive legal team was frantically whispering among themselves. "Mr. Al-Rashid, do you have any response to this testimony?" Khalid rose slowly, his arrogance completely deflated. "No, Your Honor." Then this court finds that Antonio Salamanca was a full and equal partner in the Al-Rashid oil operation, and that his actions in 1990 were heroic, not criminal. His inheritance rights transfer in full to his grandson Carlos Martinez and great-granddaughter Emma Martinez. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom as reporters rushed toward Carlos and Ahmad. Outside the courthouse, Emma ran to her father with pure joy. "Dad, does this mean great-grandpa was a hero?" "Yes, my daughter," Carlos said, lifting her up and spinning her around. "Your great-grandfather saved 43 lives." Ahmad approached them with a briefcase of documents. "Carlos, there's one more thing. I've been thinking about what to do with the partnership going forward." Carlos looked at him with curiosity. "I want to establish the Antonio Salamanca Foundation for Educational Excellence. Half the inheritance will go to your family, and half will fund scholarships for children like Emma, children with extraordinary abilities who need opportunities." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "Can we help other children learn languages like I learned?" "Any languages you want to teach," Ahmad promised. 6 months later, Carlos stood in the offices of Martinez Al-Rashid Educational Enterprises, watching Emma conduct her first online Arabic class for children around the world. She had become the youngest language instructor in history, teaching children in 12 countries through their foundation's programs. "Dad," Emma said during a break between classes, "do you think great-grandpa would be proud?" Carlos looked at his daughter, confident, brilliant, and using her gifts to help others, and then at the framed photograph of Antonio Salamanca that now hung prominently in his office. "I think, my daughter, that your great-grandfather chose family over fortune because he knew that love creates the greatest wealth of all. And now, thanks to Uncle Ahmad, we have both." Ahmad appeared in the doorway, smiling at the scene. "Antonio always said that understanding how things work is the key to fixing what's broken. I think he would be amazed to see how his choice to save those workers ended up saving the future of so many children." As Emma prepared for her next class, Carlos realized that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money. It's the courage to choose love, the wisdom to help others, and the faith that doing the right thing always leads to something beautiful. Antonio Salamanca had left his family more than money. He had left a legacy of heroism, compassion, and the knowledge that true wealth comes from the lives you touch and the love you share. And in a small apartment where it all began, Mrs. Khalil from the corner market smiled as she watched Emma's language class on her tablet, proud to have played a small part in changing the world, one word at a time. Session, did you enjoy this heartwarming story? If it touched you as much as it did me, give it a like. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that will touch your heart. Hit the bell to never miss one. Tell me in the comments, do you believe that love transcends death? Have you ever had an unexplainable experience with loved ones who passed away? I want to hear your stories. And don't forget to share this video with that special person who needs to believe in miracles and second chances. Until the next story, a heartfelt hug.